It fuses with the destructive energy that was circulating around Ivalage and demonstrates its true potential. Catastrophe aesthetic hell. This secret technique is the power of destruction. Although it has some similarities to Moss's Infinite Eater, its essence is completely different. It is a malicious technique that diverts the energy contained. In this technique to inflict damage and continue it, it can be used multiple times and can be stacked or used repeatedly. Furthermore, once damage has been inflicted, it cannot be recovered. If there is physical damage, healing magic and other magic spells are nullified. All of the natural healing energy is also drained, so it is so vicious that it is inevitable that the enemy will eventually run out of strength. This time, Guy incorporated not only his own maximum energy into this technique, but also the power of Veldora and the others. All of that was converted into negative energy that annihilated everything and was devoured by Ivalage. It is a pseudo-nothingness. It can be said that it is safer and superior in that it is controllable. Once Guy and the others had recovered their energy, they could use this technique again. On the other hand, Ivarage had no way of recovering to perfection unless he broke Guy's catastrophe eclipse. Not only was he doing his best just to maintain the status quo, but from this point onwards, he was facing a future where he would become increasingly worn down. I was also affected by that, Milim muttered quietly. Although she didn't remember, she knew that when she went berserk, Guy and Ramirez had brought her back to her senses. She hadn't been told how, but Milim thought that this technique would be possible. In fact, that was the correct answer. Even though Milim was trying to increase her power, Guy was able to adjust the balance by weakening her. It was easier said than done, but it was because he had achieved this that he was where he is today. Combining Guy's exceptional combat sense with his ultimate authority, he created a secret technique that was specialized to be effective against spiritual life forms, even effective against true dragons. That's harsh. Veldora nodded in agreement with Milim, looking stunned. Veldora also has memories of being defeated by Guy. He insists that it has nothing to do with who he is now, but a loss is a loss. The problem was that I didn't remember what had happened that led to the defeat. There was no guarantee that they would win the next battle, so Guy was a target of caution for Veldora as well. By the way, since it's practically like she's already lost to her two sisters before the fight even begins, it would be more accurate to call them something to be feared, rather than something to be wary of. Setting aside the issue of Veldora, Jijajijajijajag. Ivarage then lashed out in frustration. His entire body was engraved with cursed marks from which magical energy was leaking. This state would continue unless Guy released his authority, even though Ivarage boasted an unimaginably huge amount of magic essence and energy. If this continued, he would eventually run out of power. The time for a resolution is soon approaching. It was the first time since birth that Ivarage had felt such intense pain. Experiencing this, Ivarage went berserk. He blindly charged at Guy, but his attack was parried and he crashed into the wall. The Tensukaku shook violently, and cracks appeared on the walls that were supposed to be indestructible. Haha, look, with my catastrophe eclipse, it looks like I can even negate the laws established by Veldanava, Guy said, laughing happily. The absolute and unchanging providence established by God that was now being shaken by Guy's authority. That was only natural, as Guy's ultimate ability, ultimate skill, prideful king, Lucifer, had acquired a new ability and achieved transcendence evolution. Its name is ultimate ability, ultimate skill, Nodin's god of the abyss. This authority was created when Guy observed Rimuruz's ability modification, alteration, on Velzard and modified his own authority based on his own interpretation. It surpassed all existing powers. Ultimate ability, ultimate skill. Nodens, god of the abyss, the powers. Contained within it were diverse, including thought acceleration, omnipotent. Perception, demon lord haki, soul. Con, violence, defense, consumption. Food, imaginary space. Ability creation, ability duplication, ability preservation. Space-time control and multidimensional barrier, and it covered everything Guy had learned up until now. It was truly an authority that reached the realm of God. Guy smiled fearlessly and glared at Ivalage. It seemed that he had finally received fatal damage after taking a direct hit from Guy and the others' techniques. On the other hand, if they hadn't gone to such lengths, there would have been no chance of defeating him, so there was no doubt that he was an incredible monster. Even so, Guy will win. Even if it had been a one-on-one fight, it would have been possible to deal with it without any problems. However, it would have taken too much time and the damage would have been unavoidable. This time, with the help of his allies and the favorable conditions of the battlefield. Being Tensukaku, the damage was kept to a minimum. How lucky, Guy thought with satisfaction. Even so, Guy changed his thoughts. As expected, this authority is incredible. Rimuru is truly the one to be feared, Guy thought. I evolved the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, god of the abyss Nodens, and after using it, I understood it. With soul devouring, which can devour everything and turn it into energy. Emission-type techniques are nothing more than fodder. On top of that, the combination of teleportation and sword techniques is invincible, and if I focus on defense, I don't feel like I'll even get hurt. There's no way I'll lose in an energy attrition battle. Guy was analyzing himself. And at the same time, I think Rimuru is really making stuff up, he thought. Seeing Rimuru's authority, Guy realized something. He realized that the concept of combat had changed. The amount of magic essence, or energy, no longer determines victory or defeat. As long as he has Soul Devour, which allows him to devour the opponent's energy and make it his own, he can be certain that he will not lose. What was important was a way to hinder the opponent's recovery. If the opponent does not have this, victory is certain. Without this terrifying power, he would have had a much harder time fighting Ivalage. But this is not the end. As he watched Ivalage thrashing about, groaning in pain, Guy turned his attention to the next battle. Ivalage groaned in agony. That was also a first-time experience for me. Pain. This is the real thing. The pain I had felt earlier was nothing compared to this agony. Although Ivarage does not have the ability to sense pain, it does feel discomfort. He perceived the magical essence and energy that continued to flow out of him as an endless sense of loss. For Ivalage, this was nothing but pain. That's not all. Before I knew it, I realized that I no longer felt the bond with my children that I had always felt. Dead. My children. Why? Anger, resentment, hatred. Ivalage did not understand the true nature of emotions. But now I have learned it through experience. The countless emotions served as fuel, filling Ivarage. The Dragon of Ruin will grow even stronger. Chapter 4, Dragon of Ruin. Veldanava revived 3 monsters and summoned them. No, that's not an accurate expression. Unlike Rumina's resurrection, they were not completely revived. At first glance, it looked like they had returned to life, but the monsters were simply standing up, without any consciousness. I thought it was just for show, but it couldn't be that simple. To begin with, the 3 had died in distant locations, even if they were in the vicinity. To have brought them back to life and summoned them all the way here was an act of God on a par with, or even greater than, that of Rumina's. I decided to keep a watchful eye. My instincts told me that it would be dangerous to interfere carelessly. It is generally believed that revived monsters are weak, but since they are originally monsters, we cannot let our guard down. This battlefield is covered in a barrier, a holy purification barrier that annihilates magical energy. That's why it may have been impossible to restore the soul, but I thought that if Ruminas could do it, there was no way Veldanava couldn't, and that was the right decision. Now then, I think this will be enough bodies to serve as vessels. If there are only 3, then who will work the best for me? Veldanava said as he thrust his arm forward. 3 pale blue orbs of light were summoned from his palms and were gently sucked into each of his bodies, dwelling within them. Will have confirmed interference with space-time. It appears that souls with strong wills have been summoned from different locations. Ah, I see. He summoned someone's soul and gave it a body that he had prepared. That's an incredible amount of energy, and he must have been quite a strong man. With these guys inhabiting the bodies of monsters, it seems like things won't be easy. Grudge summoning summons those who have a grudge against this world. Oven. After the deaths of the heroes who adored Rudra, they were brought back to life. By replicating their memories as unfkmutpun luffums, digital nature, so that they could obey the heroic soul guidance, Hesha no Yoruba. Well, this one is this real thing, though. Voldanova stated calmly. It's a terrifying statement that will send chills down your spine. The heroes Misawaki summoned were supposed to be reproductions of pust. Memories inhabiting temporary bodies. They were practically real, but not the raw thing, dead heroes or Unhaja. However, it seemed that Voldanova had summoned the soul of that person, was on the verge of disappearing from the space-time just before he had completely died. It doesn't matter what time it is, past, future, or present. In other words, it is a foul play. If such an act were possible, the concept of the dead wouldn't even exist. That's what we should do before misfortune strikes. If he had such omnipotent power, wouldn't it have been better if he had brought his dead wife back to life? I retorted. Some may say that it is taboo to revive the dead. However, I don't think so. It would be one thing if they had lived out their natural lifespan, but if they died before they could achieve their goals, it would be hard to give up. If there was a way to bring him back to life, I would jump at it without hesitation. In fact, that's what happened with Shun and the others. As a result, we are where we are today. However, it is wrong to desecrate the dead. If the person ended his life satisfied, his wishes should have been respected. I don't want to control the life and death of others, and I don't think we should. Well, normally you can't ask the opinions of dead people, so it's pointless to think about it. However, if you're thinking of destroying the world because someone you love has died, I think you should try to revive the dead without worrying about whether it's taboo or not. But then why? He didn't nod. It's not that I was rejected. I just looked for it and couldn't find it. Ah, I see. Maybe he's already been reincarnated. Normally, it takes time for the soul to disperse, but there are cases where the soul is reincarnated immediately after death. Even though I'm still alive, I can hear the language of the world. Well, that's just how it goes. That being said, it's hard to say that we should give up. Lushua, right? There's a chance that Lushua could have been reborn on it. This world, too, so I think it's a bit strange to just destroy everything so quickly. I tried to persuade him. I can understand Voldanova's anger, resentment, and despair, so I hope he will reconsider. It feels like it's no longer a matter of persuasion or anything like that, but the truth is that I don't want to fight if possible. However, my hopes were dashed. I've already decided. I have my daughter, Mullam, and I have Uvalage in place of Lusha. Immediate revival is impossible, but after I destroy the entire world, if I slowly collect and decipher the information children, the day will come one A village will become the complete Lushoa. Oh no. It was a daunting method, but it didn't seem impossible. He thought that Voldanova, being a god, would eventually achieve it. In this situation, it becomes difficult to persuade them. I myself couldn't think of any words that would convince him. One common way to persuade her would be to say that Lushua doesn't want that to happen, but if she responds with, "How can a stranger understand her feelings?" I'd be at a loss for words. In fact, I've never met him. You can't get by in this world with idealism alone. We'll have no choice but to defeat it. Hey. He explains it simply, but that's an easy thing for you, Musta. I don't know what to do, but Sul has become aggressive. Well, I can see that it's a quick and reliable solution. That is, if we ignore whether it's possible or not. It's absolutely fine. As always, he has incredible confidence. Or rather, why are you so motivated? It would be kind to stop them. I saw. Certainly, it also stopped Mullum's rampage. I didn't want anyone to become a victim, so that Mullum wouldn't be sad later. That's right. Maybe Voldanova is the same. I don't know them, but there are many people who are connected to Voldanova. Thought it would be troublesome if those people turned against me, but that wasn't the case. In order to prevent anyone from feeling sad, the best thing to do would be to defeat Voldanova here and calm him down. Right now, Voldanova was so overcome with grief that he seemed to be running wild. There's even a chance he's not sane. This is because the people who brought him back to life, by inhabiting the monsters, were among the worst people I knew. Susaka Emperor Jehul, Thud Thredamanyamushtsai, Kornu, and lastly, Vega, who was supposed to have been sent to the end of time and space. Yes, it was a very impressive lineup. Jehul is the one who brought misfortune to Kaguri and the others, and if you trust it back to its roots, you'll find that he is the one who summoned Guy, the fool is unparalleled in the world. It was said that he possessed incredible power, but he had just been defeated by Yaki. To be able to come back to life already shows how strong your bad luck is. According to reports, Kornu was supposed to have been turned to charcoal by Volgrund. I don't know the details, but I've heard that they lived up to their name as Aggressa species, destroying Numera's other dimensional worlds and Brungung them under their control. I don't really have any personal experience with this, but it definitely seems like a hassle. Speaking of troublesome, there's Vega. Seriously persistent. I should have buried him for sure. Sulson seems to be in a bad mood, but now that I think about it, he did say that he jumped to the end of time and space. What exactly is he talking about? Could it be that the person who had the accident when he came back here was? It's a minor matter, so there's nothing to worry about. Is that so? That's fine then. Well, never mind about Vega. The bigger problem was that Voldanova had even brought Jehul back to life. Kornu was originally a subordinate, so it's not surprising that he brought her back to life. However, Jehul had done some pretty cruel things to Mullum. The reason Mullum became the demon lord was because she was caught up on Jehul's desires. To bring such a villain back to life and use him for his own purposes is to some completely insane. This was the best evidence that Voldanova was out of control. Bunama, please continue to be in overall command. However, if necessary, I will authorize you to take part in combat. Got it. My energy is almost back, so I can fight too. Despite the situation, Bunama laughed fearlessly. As always, he was very reliable. That being said, Bunama is in charge, so the actual work will be left to someone else. He will stay in the background and help out if anything happens. Dubla, can you stop them? If that's your order, I'll be happy to. It was a rather unreasonable request, but Dubla gladly accepted. I feel a little sorry for him, as his body must be in tatters by now. But if he doesn't, try his best now, the world will end. Thank you. With that, I entrusted the important task to Duebla. Duebla then gave Fuldwa a look of exhaustion, fatigue, toil, trouble, distress. Exhaustion and dismay. You should at least clean up after what you did with your own hands. Duebla said this as he tried to take Fuldwa away. No matter how you look at it, he still had the intention of using her. It seems like that person is dying. That's what I thought, but I didn't say anything. I cheered him on in my mind, saying, "Do your best," and left the rest to Duebla. Zelirpa watched Fuldwa being led away with a complicated look on his face. Seemed to be struggling with what the best course of action would be for him. Still, the conclusion is that he's staying here. He may be planning to witness this battle between me and Voldanova with his own eyes. Dino, Pucca, and Gracia all seem to be devoting themselves to watching and observing alongside Zalerio. In Dino's case, it's possible that he was simply slacking off, but that's better left unsaid. At the very least, the wounds he received from Voldanova hadn't fully healed, so he decided to let it go this time. Compared to Dino and the others, my 3 demon girls are full of fighting spirit. Of course, we will also participate. Of course. My lord, next time I will completely shatter their souls, so they will never be able to revive. Led by Testarossa, they all seemed to have no intention of retreating. They were clearly exhausted, but perhaps because they had drunk my special recovery potion, they seemed full of energy. It would be rude to stop him, so I decided to leave it to him. Don't do anything reckless. I understand. Leave it to me. The word reckless doesn't exist in my dictionary. Please leave it to me without worry. Testarossa nodded gracefully, Ultima energetically, and Carrara nodded a little dangerously. By the way, I think the dictionary Carrara has is defective, so I plan to give her a properly revised edition later. Masyuki stood next to the 3 demon girls as they knelt. Demon Lord Rimuru, I'll cooperate. That bastard Jahil smells fishy. I think he might have something to do with the terrorist act that took my sister. It wasn't Masyuki. This aggressive personality is Rudra. Rudra was saying something ominous. So, doesn't that mean that you brought back to life the person who killed your wife and yourself? This is just speculation, but the scent of desire is similar. A long time ago, the king of a small country met me, and he had eyes filled with ambition, just like yours. Could that king have been the perpetrator of the terrorist act? Yes, that's right. It feels almost certain. He was killed by Guy and his friends, then reincarnated and killed Lucia and Veldanava. When Dino found out about this, he was subjugated. Afterwards, he was reincarnated once again as the great sorcerer Emperor Jahil. After that, he committed all sorts of atrocities and attempted to take advantage of the orphaned Milim, causing a great disaster. It has always been a mystery how such a villain could be born. With a guy like Jahil, there's no room for leniency. I could be serious without any hesitation, or so I thought. That's trash beyond imagination. No doubt about it. This time I'll make sure to settle things properly. Well then, I guess I'll just cheer you on. The one who quietly joined my conversation with Rudra was Yuki, who had somehow arrived using teleportation. It seemed that Yuki had also come after sensing Jahil's revival, but he wasn't the type to suddenly launch an attack. He seemed to have carefully listened to our conversation before deciding where he wanted to stand. If you can nullify his abilities and skills with your authority, could you please do your best as his support? Of course, Rimuru-san. The way he winked at me at this point showed how bold Yuki was. It may sound good to say that he was relaxed, but it was a fine line between that and insensitivity. In any case, at this point, a reliable helper named Rudra appeared. By the way, what happened to Masayuki himself? Sometimes I feel like she looks at me with dead eyes, pleading for help, but I'm sure that's just my imagination. It seemed Velgrind would cooperate, so he decided to temporarily separate the people Veldanava had brought back to life from his consciousness. I faced Veldanava. It's a one-on-one situation. I'm not really feeling it, but this is where I need to put in the effort. Now then, if you really want to destroy the world, I'll do everything in my power to stop you. When I declared that, Veldanava gave a thin smile. The life form I created has now come to defy the will of its creator so clearly. I am overwhelmed with emotion. Perhaps you could achieve the feat of killing a god. I don't have any intention of killing you. You are Milim's father, and there are still people who adore you. I'll beat you up until you come to your senses and wake you up. Ha ha ha, that's interesting. If you can't do it, the world will just be destroyed, so don't worry, just give it a try. Well then, I'll take you up on your offer. I drew my sword and slashed at Veldanava. The dragon Ryumama Tutu that Kurobi had forged was a straight sword with a distinctive black blade, or so he remembered, but it had completely changed. The black blade had a beautiful rainbow-colored blade pattern that shone even without any magical power being channeled into it. He attacked with a sword-drawing technique, and I realized it just now. I was surprised, but the amazing part started from here. Veldanava showed composure as he blocked the blow with a sword that had been materialized using his own fighting spirit, but just as he thought this, the sword was cut through as easily as butter. It was the moment when my Dragon Magic Ma Sword 2 showed off its incredible sharpness. Unfortunately, Veldanava reacted instantly and used teleportation to dodge the attack before it could be slashed by the sword. I didn't think it would end like this, so I guess that's how it is. However, the good news was that my sword was extremely powerful. It's been a while since I've been truly surprised. That sword wasn't made by me, but it has hidden power equivalent to a Genesis-class sword. Genesis class, well, I don't know much about it, but there's no doubt that it's an amazing sword. My proud companion forged it, and it's like a sword that's like an extension of me. I didn't mind being praised, so I answered honestly. Kurobi would also be happy to hear that Veldanava praised him. Genesis class is not something that can be created by human hands, but there's no point in saying that. In fact, what you have in your hands is the real thing. Veldanava said this with a self-deprecating look on his face. Outside of matters related to Lucia, he seems surprisingly not to be stubborn. Veldanava quietly clasped his hands together. I will use my own sword to counter yours. It seems that it is not an embodiment of fighting spirit, but a genuine beloved sword. Although I had no obligation to wait, the best thing to do was to bring Veldanava back to his senses, so I decided to watch over him quietly. I'm not the type to play fair and square, and I think it's a bad move if I want to win. But my true feelings are that I want to wait for Guy and the others to come and help me. Judging from the overall situation, I think it would be fine to wait long enough for them to pick up their weapons. As he was thinking this and observing the situation, a spark appeared between Veldanava's hands. The divine sword returns. Veldanava whispered, and as if responding to his voice, a sword appeared. A sparkling, bubble-like glow decorates the blade. The image that comes to mind is that of Ramyun. It was a mysterious sword with bubbles rising up on the blade, then popping and disappearing. Sorry to keep you waiting. The name of this sword is Memory. It is the 8th Genesis class sword I created after I was revived, and all the events that have occurred in the 3,000 worlds, including this pivotal world, are engraved into this sword as a clear record. When I heard that, I almost interjected, "Is this the Akashic records?" The reason I didn't say it was because I realized that it was probably true. Besides, I felt like we no longer had the time to have that kind of conversation. An intimidating presence that seemed comparable to that of a dragonkind was emanating from Veldanava's sword memory. This won't break my sword, right? Is everything okay? That's fine then. Well, if a sword breaks, it's proof that your skill and level are immature. Hakuryu had told me this story so many times during his training that it was getting to be annoying. Losing a weapon on the battlefield means death. To prevent this from happening, you must not only take care of your weapon on a regular basis, but also be careful about how you handle it. To avoid putting strain on the weapon, always protect the blade with fighting spirit and aura. So, what is the name of your sword? What's the name of my sword? They call it Dragon Ryu Demon Ma Sword too, but those certainly aren't names. That's right, since it's a good opportunity. The name of this sword is Hope, Elpis. He gave the sword a name and declared it. At that moment, I felt like I was hit by a slight feeling of fatigue, but I recovered in an instant, so maybe it was just my imagination. I'm in perfect health, so I don't think there's any problem. Isn't that right? To me, it felt similar to the fatigue that comes from nomming things, but nomming my beloved sword shouldn't have any effect. Seal said it's no problem, so I'm probably mistaken. Anyway, the name of my sword has been decided to be Hope or Elpis, the hope that the world will not end, or rather, the hope that everything will go well, which also includes the desire and wish. I'm greedy, after all. I put a lot of meaning into the name Hope and Elpis. Hope Elpis, that's a nice name. Yes, thank you. When I replied, Veldanava laughed lightly. Then he narrowed his eyes and said, well then, let's get started and see how far we can follow God's providence. Those words were the signal. The sword dance begins. With Veldanava and I's swords, Ken halberds, we created a space of isolation that cut apart anything that came into contact with the surrounding area. Retreat, evacuate. Don't come near me, you'll die. No one is optimistic that Ruminas will bring them back to life, even if they die. Everyone kept their distance from us and protected themselves. That's fine, I thought. Even Benimaru kept a little distance. If an ordinary person, even if everyone here was a hero class, were caught up in it, it seemed that there was no other outcome than instant death. In this life-or-death situation, where there was no room for anyone else to intervene, I put all my energy into my deadly sword, which would cut through both of our barriers in a single blow, and clashed with Veldanava. Ivalage rose unsteadily to his feet, engulfed in the current of various emotions. Guy remained on guard. Those who are recognized by both themselves and others as the best in this world. Each unleashed their greatest and most powerful attacks. It was a miracle that Ivalage was still alive after receiving a direct hit from them. And yet, it's frightening that he still stands up calmly. That was not the case. Ivalage emitted light in all directions. At first glance, it appears to be a desperate attack. But that's not the case. It was a destructive ray that was incomparably more powerful than anything that had come before. As proof of this, the outer wall of the ground floor of Tensukaku has crumbled away. One reason for this was probably Guy's catastrophe eclipse, which had caused an abnormality in the indestructible attribute, but it was a shock that overturned common sense, sending shivers down the minds of those who saw it. Several floors of Tensukaku had disappeared. The upper part is connected to the sky, so it appears to be hanging from the sky. The giants who lived in the area were gazing up at the Tensukaku in amazement. The tower we must protect. The Tensukaku, a symbol of immortality since ancient times, has collapsed. I look up at the sky, unable to believe it, unable to want to believe it. Guy and the others had no time for that. Having been hit by Ivarid's destructive ray, which had enough power to destroy the Tensukaku, there was no way he could afford to remain stunned. Or rather than being stunned, it was desolate. You bastard, take this more seriously. I'm doing my best. Guy yelled at Veldora. Veldora is excellent at attacking, but not so good at defending. In the first place, he had a strong body that was immune to most attacks, so he didn't need to worry about defense. That's why Veldora tried to assert that he was doing his best, but... Veldora-chan, are you going to defy Guy? Aren't you being too favorite, despite, pitying, obnoxious, obsessed? Is there a problem? No, nothing. Velzard interrupted, and she fell silent. A sad balance of power had been established, as if no younger brother could defy his older sister. Incidentally, Velgrand quickly gave up, cancelled her separate body, soul body tie, and reunited with her main body. Her brilliant fighting style was so impressive that it could be included in a textbook. Perhaps it was better for Veldora that he didn't have to be blamed by his two sisters. Even so, it was clear that Veldora looked pitiful. Veldora was troubled and decided to change the direction of his attack. Putting me aside, isn't Milim also not being serious? He had put himself aside and was trying to point his finger at Milim. Milim objected to this. What are you talking about? I always give it my all. What are you saying? You were far more violent and powerful when I was trying to stop you. Well, that was true. I'm not slacking off. Milim argued, feeling disappointed, but as Veldora had said, there was no doubt that her power was overwhelmingly weaker than when she was in her stampede madness state. That's because Milim isn't using Wrathful King, Satanale. Guy pointed that out. Ahem. Milim was shaken, and her eyes wandered. When he went berserk, he lost all sense of reason and, driven by rage, activated the full power of Wrathful King, Satanale. However, now that he was calm, he could not bring himself to casually use a power that could destroy the world. Well, to begin with, that power is so dangerous that even I might not be able to control it. Hearing this, Veldora also looked troubled. It would be like poking a snake in a bush, and it would be unbearable if Milim started going out of control again. That's a problem, Veldora thought. However, Guy had a different idea. He believed that Milim could at least control her own powers. In Guy's case, when he recreated Milim's Wrathful King Satanale with his own prideful king, Lucifer, he had to keep the output at around 40% to keep it running safely at all times. This was because Milim's Wrathful King Satanale was far too powerful. Right now, with the ultimate skill Nodin's, God of the Abyss, it was possible to safely operate up to 90%. However, Milim, don't be scared, just do it. If you get out of control again, we'll stop you. Guy had high hopes for Milim, that she could at least control the authority that was born from her own desire with her own will. Milim is not one to not sense this trust. Although he is still afraid of going out of control and is deeply conflicted inside, he is motivated to work hard, knowing that now is the time. Okay, I get it. I'll do my best not to go out of control, but if I fail, I'll leave it to you. Milim steeled her resolve and activated Wrathful King Satanale once again. Milim already possesses a huge amount of magical energy, and her power grows significantly. Seeing this, Veldora thought, if things get out of control, I'm sure we'll get into trouble again. Naturally, Guy's words about us stopping them must have included Veldora in them. And most importantly, if Milim goes out of control again, Rimuru will be furious. Not only was he not the only one at fault, but Veldora was not responsible for this either, And yet, for some reason, he could see a future where he was forced to take full responsibility. Still, I wasn't foolish enough to say it out loud. He understood that since Velzard was there was no way anyone would listen to what he had to say. HMPH, I've even acquired the ability to see into the future. Even though Veldora tried to act tough, he couldn't shake off the sadness he felt. With all this in mind, Guy and the others regrouped. Velgrind has left, but the 4 strongest people remain. Milim's power is also increasing, and the battle is still to come. Guy, Velzard, Milim, and Veldora re-energized. However, something seemed strange about Ivalage. He stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the other side of the collapsed wall of Tensukaku. Guy and the others were lucky that they weren't pursued, but now it felt ominous. What was he looking at? Guy followed Ivarid's gaze. There, Veldanava had descended from the sky and landed on the ground. He didn't care about friend or foe, and completely ignored the holy purification. Barrier. The one who was dealing with Veldanava was Rimuru, who was fighting with such intensity that no one around him could get close, and he was putting up an incredibly fierce battle. My other half. Muttering this, Ivalage floated lightly into the air. Immediately afterwards, it begins to fly. Just so you don't even notice us. Yeah, you're licking it. It's humiliating. I'll unleash my wrath on you. That's true. If we get in Rimuru's way, he'll probably say something mean to us. So let's quickly chase after him and stop him. And so, Guy and the others set off in pursuit of Ivalage. Here, to the east, the area had been reduced to a wasteland by the Ivalage attack. Nicholas, who is part of the holy purification barrier, has been exposed to dangerous attacks many times, but thanks to everyone's desperate efforts to protect him, he is safe. Arnaud, who was in charge of the upper part of the sky, also endured the force by clinging to the Tensukaku. It seems like they're trying to hide their presence and not stand out as much as possible. That can't be helped. If they were to get caught up in such fierce fighting, they would have no time to maintain the barrier. Even though he was in a situation where he couldn't escape, he ended up getting caught up in the aftermath of the battle between Veldanava and me. I was doing my best to avoid any casualties, but this was something that was beyond my control. That's how devastating the damage caused to the surrounding area by the sword fight between Veldanava and me was. The energy contained in the swords is so tremendous that a shock wave is released the moment they clash. Or rather, it's an explosion. A more appropriate expression would be that the atmosphere explodes. Even if heat rays are not emitted, large-scale destruction will occur. As expected, it's too dangerous, so I choose to avoid it rather than block it with my sword. However, that is a problem in itself. Veldanava's sword strokes were so sharp that it was impossible to dodge them. After seeing them, the multiple barriers that had been cast with all their might were shattered with just one blow. However, without them, the damage would be so great that they had to be recast every time they were destroyed. My future attack prediction is also unreliable. Veldanava was just too fast. However, an unexpected savior appeared. Rimuru-san, move to the right. It was a thought transmission from Chloe. Without any hesitation or doubt, I follow his instructions. Naturally, the result was a brilliant and successful evasion. Ahem. Veldanava had a suspicious look on his face, but it was nothing he knew. I maintained a calm expression, taking the attitude that it's all down to my own ability. Veldanava launched a fierce attack, but with advice from Chloe, they were able to deal with it safely and securely. Because there is enough room, it is easy to deflect attacks with a sword. If it were to be received head-on, a shock wave would be generated, but if it was oriented to deflect it, there would be no unnecessary energy exploding. It's amazing. I hope they can keep it up and shut out the opponent without any problems. That's what I thought, but it seems that was too naive. Well, that's the usual thing. You can't just think about taking it easy or anything like that. The first thing that was unexpected was that immediately after a loud roar rang out. On the battlefield, several floors above ground of Tensukaku collapsed. Arnaud was so startled that he nearly fell off the outer wall. If he had been a little lower, he might have been caught up in the collapse and the holy purification. Barrier, holy field might have been deactivated. In that sense, it wasn't the worst. Yet, in fact, he was safe, so it could be said that he was just barely lucky. Even so, I know how sturdy Tensukaku is from my own experience. If it were to collapse, it would undoubtedly be a terrible event. It was unclear what had happened, but there was no time to worry about it. A beautiful woman jumped out from where the building had collapsed. It was Ivalage, who had taken the form of Milim's mother, Lucia, and was heading towards us. Is he targeting me, or Veldanava? It seems it was Veldanava, but this is the worst. I thought it was safe as long as it wasn't me, but then Chloe made an ominous statement. In fact, it seems like a confirmed future event, so it's far from being ominous. If you prepare yourself for what's going to happen, the answer will soon become clear. Kayaha, you're mine. Veldanava stabbed Ivaraj in the chest as he shouted like that. He then swung his sword down, pinning him to the ground. The sword, which contained an immense amount of energy comparable to that of a true dragon, stopped Ivaraj's movements. I was stunned, but then I realized that it was something different from an attack. I see, that sword called memory seems to have the effect of implanting past memories into the target. In this case, memories are being transplanted into Ivalage. Those memories are Are you planning to implant Lucia's memories into Ivalage? Before I could point it out, Guy, who had followed Ivalage, interjected. I had heard the answer and already knew it, but it seemed Guy had also deduced it just by looking at the current situation, and at this point, he must have guessed Veldanava's objective as well. I thought it would be impossible to recreate Ivalage as Lucia, no matter how you look at it. Maybe you couldn't bring the dead back to life, so you're trying to create them again. Yeah, apparently, he plans to destroy this world in order to collect all of the information children scattered throughout the world. That's unreasonable. I knew he was an idiot, but he's still that stupid even after coming back to life. Guy said harshly. True dragons aren't just selfish, they're also full of idiots and so on, he continued to complain. Velzard and Veldora, who arrived late, also had sour expressions on their faces. That's so bad. I'm clever, but as a relative, I'm a disgrace. No, I think Milim is the most selfish one. You're with me. Guy asserted it, without me having to point it out. The reason I didn't say anything was because I was wondering who was being selfish, Veldora or me. Since they're both the same, Guy's statement is correct. I nodded vigorously and showed my agreement. Now, Ivaraj is unable to move. Perhaps because information was flowing in from memory, all strength had left. His entire body, and he was motionless. It is unclear what will happen after his return, but it will likely take some time. In that case, it would be best to stop Veldanava before Ivalage returns. Let's all take on the challenge now. That's what I suggested. Hearing this, Veldanava smiled. Oh dear, are they all planning to turn against me? That statement froze the atmosphere. Even Guy was nervous, but he instantly changed his mind and showed his resolve. Well, I guess there's no other way. It's my duty as a friend to stop you. Following this, Velzard smiled. That's true. Guy taught me that simply following orders isn't enough. I won't make any mistakes again. Velzard seemed to regret that her methods hadn't been able to heal her brothers. Loneliness. The senses of a true dragon were off, so she couldn't be at ease. But she shouldn't be doing anything crazy again. From the beginning until now, Veldora has never wavered in his actions. I believe in Rimuru, and it remains reliable. Incidentally, she doesn't seem to be as scared of her older brother as she is of her older sisters. This may also be due to the difference in their feelings towards each other. Milim has also made her hostile intentions towards Veldanava clear. That's too selfish. I too want my loved ones to come back to life, but sacrificing others for that purpose is something I find hard to understand. Milim's statement was a very reasonable one. But however, even though his daughter had admonished him, it did not resonate with Veldanava. Though he had a sad expression on his face, he spoke only with his own feelings in mind. There's no need to eliminate everyone. At the very least, there's no possibility that the people who were alive before Lucia died have any fragments of her mixed in. It's okay to overlook them. In other words, if it was just Guy and the others present, he would take them to the new world that Veldanava would create. However, no one agrees with this. Velzard in particular asked Veldanava with an angry expression on her face. Brother, you gave me some time, right? You promised me that you would take those I froze to the next world, right? Was that a lie? From Velzard's words, it was inferred that she had intended to freeze not only Milim's subordinates but many more people as well, and that was precisely Velzard's kindness in trying to reduce the number of casualties. It makes me think that if only I had done the reporting, contacting, and consulting spinach properly, but since that's already over, I'll use it for the next time. More importantly, Veldanava's answer to that question was important. Well, it's pretty predictable to some extent. If Lucia had been resurrected safely, I wouldn't have killed her. That means that if there was anyone who possessed a fragment of the factors that made up Lucia, he intended to annihilate them without mercy and retrieve the information child. As was the case with Feldway, I wonder why people resort to such reckless behavior. Your brother is broken. Is that so? That's right, so I will also fight with all my might. Velzard was the person closest to Veldanava, and so Velzard declared that she was no longer a relative. Hearing that, I also have mixed feelings. If you've been told this much, can't you reflect on yourself a little? That's what I hoped, but Veldanava remained unwavering in a bad way. That's a shame. Veldanava shrugged his shoulders. The sad expression he had shown earlier had disappeared in an instant. Maybe it really is broken. He probably doesn't really have any interest in anything other than Lucia. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly dangerous. I'm not the only one who feels this way. Tension is visible on everyone's faces. It seemed that a fight was unavoidable. Now, your name is Rimuru. The reason you were able to oppose me was because you were being advised by someone hiding there, right? But those tricks are over now. Veldanava expressionlessly snapped his fingers, and space split open, causing Chloe to roll out. Her whole body was covered in cuts, and there was a large gash around her side.